The scraping sound of metal beneath my boots echoed down the long corridor as our crew pushed deeper into the bowels of the facility. The dim red emergency lights flickered overhead, casting long, haunting shadows on the rusted walls. The silence between us was thick, broken only by the occasional grunt or labored breath. We were all in too deep, literally. The debt we owed to the company was suffocating, leaving us no choice but to accept this job, no matter the risks. I glanced at my teammates. There was Mason, our muscle. He carried the crowbar like it was an extension of his arm. Amelia, our tech expert, nervously scanned the path ahead, the light from her flashlight bouncing off steel beams and ancient machinery. Lastly, Ben, our navigator, was already flipping through maps on his handheld device, trying to find the quickest route to our escape. The deeper we went, the stranger the atmosphere became. The air grew thicker, colder, and an unnatural sense of dread settled over us. The facility was supposed to be abandoned, but it felt alive somehow. Every corner we turned, every door we opened, the sensation that we were being watched only grew stronger. Finally, we reached the deepest chamber. Piles of scrap littered the floor. Old tech, mechanical parts, and forgotten relics of a time long gone. It was enough to cover what we needed to dig ourselves out of our financial pit. We worked quickly, grabbing items, adrenaline pumping through our veins. But as we collected the last piece, a faint noise reached my ears. A low humming sound. It was coming from the walls, reverberating through the metal.
"What is that?"
Amelia whispered, her voice trembling. Before I could respond, the lights flickered violently, plunging us into brief darkness. When they buzzed back to life, the shadows around us seemed darker, deeper, almost moving. Something had changed. Then we heard it, a soft scraping, followed by a low growl. Mason gripped his crowbar tighter, his knuckles white.
"We need to move now."
We turned and began our retreat, trying to trace our way back through the labyrinth of corridors. But the facility seemed different now, as if it were shifting, trapping us inside. And the noises, the scraping, the growls, were growing louder, more frequent. I caught a glimpse of movement from the corner of my eye. A figure, pale and hunched, skittered across the ceiling, disappearing into the shadows. Before I could fully register what it was, the others saw it too. Our pace quickened, the fear mounting in our chests. The first entity appeared just as we reached the narrow staircase leading up to the main level. It was a twisted, grotesque thing, vaguely humanoid but distorted, like something had warped its bones and stretched its skin. Its limbs were unnaturally long, with too many joints bending in the wrong directions, as if someone had crudely reassembled a human body without understanding how it worked. The sound it made, a wet, rattling hiss, sent chills down my spine. Mason swung his crowbar, connecting with a sickening crunch. The creature screeched and it recoiled, but it wasn't dead. It dragged itself across the floor, its mangled body still coming for us. We ran, no longer cautious. The sound of our boots pounded against the metal floor, drowning out the chorus of otherworldly shrieks behind us. I noticed the corridors in the facility we had mapped out were now twisted and turned in unfamiliar ways. Doors that should have led to safety opened up into more darkened hallways, and the walls seemed to close in on us, forcing us deeper into its core. However, we finally escaped and could see our ship in the distance. Once we reached it, Ben went to go open the door, and a figure appeared between the rest of us and the ship. Its eyes were hollow, skin pale and translucent, with dark veins spidering beneath the surface. Its once human face was twisted in pain, its mouth moving as if it were trying to speak but couldn't. The horrifying revelation washed over us like ice water. It was one of ours. Although it was unrecognizable at first, there was no mistaking the faded name patch sewn into its tattered uniform. It read Harris. He had been one of the first workers sent to this planet. But the company had lost all contact with his crew months ago. We assumed they had been wiped out, yet there he was. Or what was left of him.
Harris?
The creature twitched, its head jerking at the sound of its name. For a brief moment, its milky eyes seemed to focus on us. A flicker of humanity struggled to resurface. Then it convulsed, letting out a low guttural growl as it took a step forward. The transformation had twisted him beyond recognition, but something of the man we once knew was still inside, trapped in a body that no longer obeyed. Amelia whispered frantically,
We can't just leave him like this. There must be a way to help him.
But how? This was no ordinary injury or illness. He had been turned into something unnatural. Other creatures we had encountered so far had been mindless, but Harris was different. There was a glimmer of recognition in his gaze, a spark of the man he once was. If we could reach him, maybe we could bring him back.
You're right. We need to try. We can't just abandon him,
I said, my voice firmer than I felt. Mason gritted his teeth, his grip tightening on the crowbar.
And what if we can't save him? What if he turns on us? Then we do what we have to do,
I replied. Amelia lifted up a small device, a portable medical scanner.
This can't fix him, but maybe it can give us some answers.
She approached cautiously, the scanner trembling in her hands as she activated it. A faint beam of light swept over Harris's twisted form, and the device beeped, displaying a series of unreadable data. Amelia's eyes widened as she read the screen.
His cells, they're mutating rapidly. But there's still normal tissue underneath. If we can disrupt the mutilation process, we might be able to reverse it.
Ben glanced nervously at the door, then back at Harris.
And how exactly do we do that? There's a control panel back in the facility,
Amelia said, her voice growing more confident.
It controls the environmental conditions in this place. If we can overload the system, it might release a burst of energy strong enough to reset whatever's causing this mutation.
It was a long shot, a dangerous one.
All right,
I said, meeting each of their gazes.
We're going back in.
With one look at Harris, his disfigured form twitching with barely contained aggression, we turned and retraced our steps, plunging back into the darkness of the facility. The sounds of the other entities echoed through the corridors, but this time we weren't just running for our lives. We had a purpose. Reaching the control room was no easy task. The creatures were everywhere now, shadows moving at the edges of our vision, growls rumbling from unseen corners. Some of the entities were small, almost insect-like, scuttling across the floors and walls in the periphery of our vision. Others were massive, hulking forms that we only caught glimpses of before they disappeared in the dark. But we persisted, driven by the hope that we could save our friend. Finally, we reached the panel. Amelia's hands flew over the controls, her brow furrowed in concentration as she bypassed the security protocols and initiated the overload sequence. The facility shuddered, a deep hum resonating through the walls as power surged through the system.
Now!
She yelled. We sprinted toward the exit, the hum growing louder, almost deafening. The creatures seemed to sense the change in the air. They shrieked and scurried away, retreating into the shadows. As we reached the final door, Harris was waiting for us. But something had changed. His form was less distorted. He looked at us with clearer eyes, and for the first time, he spoke.
Thank you.
But then his eyes flickered, a cold smile curling on his lips that didn't belong to him. A deep, unsettling voice followed his words. One that wasn't Harris at all.
Death
to the company.
The door behind him slammed shut, trapping us inside as the facility's lights flickered out, one by one, until there was nothing but the scraping sounds of the entities charging towards us.